All right. So, welcome to the Crashburn Alley 2014 MLB Draft live video chat. I guess, by default, your host, Mike Baumann. This guy without a name is Eric Longenhagen, and we are here to take your questions about the draft and the Phillies and Eric's natural John Stamos hair.
Well, I didn't shower this morning. Jill and I woke up at 7 to a phone call from the UPAC people who told us that our stuff was going to be delivered to our house in Tempe, 2 hours away, in less than 2 hours, and so we sprinted down the Route 17 here in Arizona in a car with a bad transmission until we got here. So this is God-given.
That sounds a little bit like a country song.
I don't know. I don't think it's as sad enough to be a country song because we got to our house without the car breaking down, and nobody's dog died, and we weren't drinking. So I think that's pretty much covers all country music song subject matter, right? We felt free though.
That's good. I'm sorry I wasn't more enthusiastic about that.
It's okay.
So Eric is with us from his new home in Arizona that he has just moved to in the past
2 hours.
2 hours?
Yeah.
And I see our viewership is climbing slowly up towards the double digits. So I'm going to put one more call out for questions, and then we'll sort of get started here. So,
how do you see how many people are watching this?
Oh, it's because I'm the moderator.
Oh, it's you. Okay.
I've been endowed by special powers. We're up to 9 viewers now.
That's fine. My narcissism is curious about how many people are watching me.
Yeah, my narcissism's a little disappointed right now.
We have to be. I think we both just writing on the internet and thinking that people are going to read our stuff. I think there is a degree of that to each of us. Is there not? Do you think that they're like? Will you admit that?
Yeah, I would probably not have put as much effort into writing about sports for free on the internet if I knew how few people read it. So, like, Bill has let me into the site stats a few times, and I'd just as soon not know. So, all right.
I purposely avoid it, but it's okay. It gives me an excuse to. I've got to email minor league media directors and say, hey, I write for this website that's like sort of loosely affiliated with ESPN, or at least it was.
Yeah, not anymore.
So it's getting me free admission to 9 or 10 minor league ballparks over the last couple of years, so that's nice.
Yeah, I was credentialed for the entire season for Ohio State baseball this year.
That's nice.
Yeah, I really only needed to get into one game, and they just said, yeah, screw it. Here, you have a season pass. All right, so let's start out with the critical question from at the Good Fight: Parker or Exum?
Oh, Exum.
Yeah, I'm definitely pro Exum as well. I don't think Parker can guard anybody.
Part of it, I think, is the new toy syndrome that comes with just prospecting in general. I think that the next guy, the guy we haven't seen, the unknown commodity is always a little more appealing. And I like Parker's game, but I don't like his body.
Yeah.
I really don't. It really bugs me.
He reminds me of myself in that respect. You like the game, but you don't like the body.
I didn't watch a ton of Duke games this year just because college sports in general or something, other than baseball, take a back seat for stuff. But I think that, just the body bothers me on Parker, just just being serious about it. It does. And part of that is because of Anthony Bennett last year, I guess, has me a little bit gun shy. But at 19 years old, I want some physical projection. I want lean and wiry and thin.
It's a little bit of the Larry Greens to that Jabari Parker body.
can't think of anyone built like Jabari coming out of college at such a young age.
What is he,
That
6'8", 240?
yeah, I can't think of a comparable sort of physical comp.
Yeah, certainly nobody that you'd expect.
Not a freshman anyway.
Yeah, not a freshman who you'd want to play is kind of like a stretch four. All right, but let's get back to baseball. So, yeah. I don't know. Do you want to start at the top?
Sure.
Do you want one? Who's the best player in the draft for you?
Well, it would have been Jeff Hoffman. I've seen, I think, out of the guys that were preseason in the conversation for 1-1, Hoffman, Rodon, Trey Turner, although that feels like so long ago now. Those guys, I think I've seen most of those guys in the last calendar year. And at least with the looks I had at him, Hoffman was the guy I would have put at the top of the board.
And yeah, you saw him you just said you saw him in person.
Yeah, I saw Hoffman in Charlottesville late February against what was probably the best lineup in the country, and he looked fine, really good. And then I saw Rodon about a month later, and I think that was the worst start Rodon had all spring against the University of Maryland. And those were the two, but I guess it's almost Brady Aiken not by default. I mean, the kid's good, but if you were gonna, over the last 5 years, pick guys that are worthy of going 1-1, you'd probably come up with 10 names before you got to Brady Aiken. I would assume so. I mean, even just going back to that 2011 draft, which was just loaded. They're just guys that I think are more interesting.
Yeah, I don't dislike him. I have never seen him pitch, but just from what I've heard, he's tall, he knows how to pitch, and his velocity's jumped up, and he'd be a first round prospect at 17. That's the other thing. He's young for the draft class too. He'd be a first round prospect even with 3 miles an hour off his fastball.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just I don't know. I was so in the tank for Rodon before the season that it's been a bitter pill for me to swallow.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to talk about there because as ironclad as that seemed before the season, there's a lot to worry about there, and maybe that's just because the look I had at him was so. And I mean, it wasn't good when I saw him, and the slider was still the best secondary pitch I've ever seen on an amateur player. And I sit here and the tone of my voice is demure when I'm talking about this guy. It's sort of bizarre, but just so we can hit on Aiken, I guess. So people know, I mean, there's polish there for someone his age, and you mentioned he is young for the class. I think, was it Rainey Jazzy-Yurley who did the study and wrote for one of the BP books about how important age is, relative to draft class.
I have no idea.
I think it was Rainey that did the study and wrote it up, and it is important, and it's certainly something that I think factors in with these teams when they're deciding who to take, at least as a tiebreaker. But I think Aiken turns 18 early this fall, so he is young for the class. But it's an above-average fastball, and you did say that he had the spike in velocity this year, which anecdotally is something that somewhat of a red flag for surgeries, but I don't think there's been any data to support that. I think that's purely an anecdotal thing at this point.
Yeah, I remember people worried about that with John Gray too.
Yeah, and Strasburg I think coming out too. But yeah, he's got 3 present above average pitches already, as some reports go, with the fastball, the curveball, and the changeup, and the command is already there. So for a 17-year-old to have that is, I don't necessarily think that there's an insane, amount of upside there, but if he's a 2 or a 3, then that's fine with me.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go 1-1, but I don't know if the Astros know for sure yet that he's going to go 1-1. because I think they're going to play with money. I think they're going to see what they can do monetarily to save themselves some money, like they did with Correa instead of Buxton a couple years ago. And I guess maybe arguably you could say they kind of did it with Appel last year a little bit, although I'm not sure it was as clear to take Bryant instead of Appel at 1-1 last year.
Yeah, I don't think that was clear, and I don't know that Correa was sort of a half step behind Buxton and Appel, but I don't think that it would have been insane to pick him just on talent. There would have been worse, sort of low cost number 1 overall signings.
The Matt Bushes of the world, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I think
that worked out.
Well, part of the thing that you could argue against Buxton in that draft too was that he wasn't playing against the same sort of competition in rural Georgia that other players were. So I guess that was sort of hanging over his projection. The same thing was sort of hanging over Mike Trout when the Angels popped him as part of the reason he fell is because he wasn't playing against anybody in South Jersey.
Right.
So, but I think ultimately it'll be Aiken, and I think it'll be a fine pick. And I think I think there's a little bit of, I think the internet community wants the Astros to do well. I know I do. And I think that some of the way, just like it used to be Tampa, I think some of the way we look at the things that Houston does now is sort of clouded by our desire for them to do well. I know I like Luno and, who we've all read Mike Fast's stuff and, Kevin Goldstein and all these guys that but I think that Aiken, if I were picking number 1, I guess it would be Aiken. It would be Aiken. Who would you take 1-1 if you had 1-1?
I guess it would be Aiken. I'd still give a lot of thought to taking Rodon. I love the slider. I love the I've been a noted Garrett Cole fan as he's ascended the minors. I love those big beefy college pitchers, but I'm biased for 2 reasons. One, I'm not a scout, and 2, I watch so much more college baseball than I do high school baseball. So I've seen I've seen more of Carlos Rodon over the past 12 months than I have of most of the San Diego Padres. So I just really like that that bulldog mentality, the body, the slider, the whole thing. And I think getting out of what was kind of a toxic NC State environment this year, I think will do him good. So I couldn't fault anybody for taking any of Jack or Alex Jackson, Aiken or Rodon.
When I went to see NC State against Maryland, the second day I was there, I came for the day game on Saturday. And even sitting next to the dugout down the first baseline so I could get a look at some swings and like peering into the NC State dugout, the vibe coming out of there, I know it's just all conjecture and stuff, but even like the Peterson brothers were kind of bickering with each other. It was just kind of strange. But that team as a whole, between Rodon, Trey Turner, and Brett Austin, who's also an interesting prospect, there's talent on that team, and there are a couple other arms in that team that I think are certainly draft worthy. But for whatever reason, they were just god awful that series, and a lot of other series. And as bad as Rodon was the night I saw him, and that night he was sitting 91 to 94, mostly on the lower end of that, especially later in the start. Had no command of it. The slider was plus at times. Again, was more inconsistent as the start went along. And the changeup was just sort of okay. He still looked like a number 3 starter, and he looked kind of stiff in the back. I know he's had back problems in the past, and there's no physical projection there. So as much as you might like that body type, I'm looking at a guy who's maxed out physically that I'm taking with one of the top 2 picks in the draft, or thereabouts. I guess if we're going to project Rodon to number 2. There are issues there, but again, it's the best secondary pitch I've seen on an amateur player. I've only been doing this seriously for like almost half a decade now, so it's not like I have this incredible catalog of experience to say that and have it really mean anything. And I like him, but there are more red flags there than there were. The media was talking about before the year, except for I guess Frankie Pilieri from Perfect Game. I know liked Hoffman more than Rodon before the season started, and was worried about Rodon's back. But other than that, I mean, I don't know if is there another plus pitch or tool in this draft?
Well, I mean there is, but not of anybody that you'd
right now.
Like not that plays. Certainly not that plays like that. I mean there are a couple runners, but
sure, yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't. Nobody that I'm thinking of. There's no tool at the top of the draft that I think is as good as Rodon's slider, and I think he's somebody that I'm kind of hoping for the Marlins to take him now and sort of bookend him with Jose Fernandez with the and they've got Haney and Evaldi and Henderson Alvarez for another complete game shutout the other night.
Rodon would have the lowest fastball velocity on the staff.
Yeah, that's kind of insane to think about. I mean, that's going to be a good team. All right, let's move on to. First of all, I want to apologize. I didn't realize that I needed to switch between our cameras, so as I forgot to do again. So like the first 5 minutes of this thing was all on me. So now you know what Eric looks like, and
That's okay. I don't care.
Pay a little bit more attention to that. All right, so let's get into some of these questions.
Good questions.
Yes. John Nasula wants to know, will they snitch again? Which I guess has larger relevance with the Phillies ratting out Ben Wetzler and Jason Monda to the NCAA. I don't know. Do you think it's going to have any relevance to
I'm
being able to sign people?
I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't been mentioned just yet by anybody about whether or not the players or the advisors that the Phillies are talking about have been, kind of testy. I think based on the sheer volume of the media and fan backlash that was sort of received when that happened, I think based on that they're kind of going to avoid doing that again. I don't see. See, what's weird is there was no benefit for them to do it in the first place. So I can't sit here and say that based on, their self-interest they won't do it again because there was no benefit to it in the first place. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Phillies are going to act rationally when it comes to this thing that sort of happened last year because they didn't last year.
Yeah, I didn't get I didn't understand the angle in doing that in the first place.
But I don't know who they're talking to in the first round. I know we have a general idea of those 2 or 3 guys that we think they want based on what, people with more sources than I have, sort of put out there in mock drafts and stuff like that. So they have a better idea than I do, which is just sort of a very small idea, and we'll get into that, I guess, as we go. But I can't see them snitching again, but I couldn't have seen them snitching in the first place, so I honestly don't know.
Yeah, that's the only thing that the Phillies have done. I mean, for as much crap as I give the front office, that was probably the most shocking thing that they had done, because that I think it was Aaron Fitt broke that at 11:30 at night, and I literally laid awake in bed wondering what on earth was going on, which man, that's doesn't make me sound like a particularly interesting person, I guess. But so let's move on as fast as we can. Let's see if we can get Ethan Witt Would you be happy if the Phillies took Nola and Gatto rounds 1 and 2? So do you want to just talk about Nola, or do you want to talk about sort of, we're in the same camp. We both like Jeff Hoffman at number 7 for the Phillies.
Yes. And we can talk. I know that just as a quick mention, because you brought his name up, I think Chris Crawford said that the first place he's hearing Hoffman might go is 7. So that would be nice. But we'll talk about him in a bit. Was Nola? Nola's really interesting, and I think you're a little less enthused about that potential outcome than I am, because he's got that quote unquote safe tag. But you're looking at a guy with a plus fastball, and probably when the cement is dry, a 60-65 changeup, and an arm slot that's probably going to offset right-handed hitters, even if the breaking ball only plays at fringe average or average. And as much as I don't like the delivery, he's apparently double-jointed. I don't know what kind of impact that would have on his long-term viability or his ability to pitch a ton of innings. But the dude is double-jointed, and if you slow down Nola's delivery on, like on YouTube or whatever, they have, I think, some slow-motion stuff of his delivery. You'll see like how hard the elbow leads the arm through the delivery, which is never something that you want to see. Like Billy Wagner was like the worst at that, which just it worked out fine for him, but still, that's just sort of the most violent thing that occurs during the delivery for me, is that the elbow leads the arm so hard through the delivery, and then you can see weird like movement, almost like it looks like Nola's shoulders like kind of dislocating through the delivery. It's very strange, but apparently, the fact that he's double jointed, which I forget the medical term for now, but apparently it's fine with him. I'm gonna snack on some blueberries here because I haven't eaten yet today.
All right. You go. I absolutely love Aaron Nola as a college pitcher. He's one of those guys that I've seen, like Rodon, that I would go out of my way to watch when he was on ESPN3. And, it's not even the plus fastball and the 6 changeup. He's got great command. He's extremely steady, no history of injury. I'm sort of talking myself into him. Just, this is the highest the Phillies have drafted in a decade, and people are the safe number 3 starter thing bothers me for a couple reasons. One, if you're a team that's trying to rebuild and rebuild quickly, then you're gonna need more than a number 3 starter. And the other thing is, you could take the safe guy and still miss. How many pitchers got drafted behind Danny Hultzen? And
I know that's the first name I think of too when you say safe.
Nobody's safe. I saw Danny Hultzen against South Carolina in the College World Series. Like the week after he got drafted, and he 3 innings, faced 10, struck out 8. And had to leave with the flu. Like, this is what he could do with the flu so bad he couldn't pitch. And, even money, he misses the big leagues entirely. So, Nola is as close to a sure thing as you're going to get out of an amateur pitcher, which is to say he's not a sure thing at all. But the other thing is, for me, this is sort of a 5-player draft, and the Cubs are, take out the Cubs, I think that those 5 players are going to go 1 through 3 and 5 and 6. So, I would feel, I guess my disappointment with Nola would be less about the Phillies taking him at 5, or not 5, at 7, and less about that than it is about somebody more exciting like Nick Gordon or Tyler Kolek or even Alex Jackson falling to 7.
I don't know. I don't even kind of think Nola's going to be there at 7, because I think the reports, the way the rumors are floating in, says that 4 for the Cubs is a real possibility. And so I don't know if he's even going to be there. I know that if he's not, I think Plan B is might be Sean Newcomb. If you go back and look at the ESPN3 archives of the LSU, I forget which LSU game it was, but you can see when they show all the scouts there for Nola's start, you can see Sal Agostinelli, the Phillies international scouting director, in attendance there. And I think the fact that his presence at one of Nola's starts has sort of coincided with the rumor that the Phillies are really on Nola is telling. And I don't think you waste eyes like Sal's at some guy who you're just kind of on. I think when you send Sal Agostinelli, who is one of the better international scouting directors in the business, when you send him to go see a college player, you're serious about that guy. And Sal was also at Sean Newcomb's start against Rutgers that I was at. He was there too. So I think that that's an indication that the Phillies like Newcomb as well, and that he might be a secondary or tertiary option at 7 if Nola is gone. But then the Mariners pick at 6, and Jack Sorensic himself has been in to see Newcomb. So I don't know what DEFCON 1 is for the Phillies at 7 if Nola and Newcomb are both gone. I think at that point that would mean that someone's fallen.
Yeah, I mean, just by math, one of those 5 guys would have to be there. I think we give the Phillies scouting and player dev a lot of crap, but they're not.
I don't, because I like those guys.
Okay, I give them a lot of crap for their results at least, but if I don't even know who would fall if Alex Jackson falls to 7, I'd imagine they'd go off script and take him.
I think that the most likely guy to fall, I think, would be Nick Gordon. I think if Jackson fell to 5 to Minnesota, I kind of think they'd have to pull the trigger, even though they've been on Nick Gordon, it seems like, since the start of things. And I like Nick Gordon quite a bit. And even you never want it to get to this point, but as a fallback option, you can always stick him on the mound. And I know that's something that's been said a lot about a lot of different guys, like Anthony Gose and oh God, I don't even know. There's so many guys that have interesting arms that pitched in high school too. That you say that about. If Nick Gordon's going to work out the way you want him to, it's going to be as a shortstop.
Yeah.
But I really like Nick. I like him more than. I think I like him more than I liked J.P. Crawford at this time last year. And that kind of sounds crazy now that Crawford's performed at the level he has.
Well, this time last year, this is 10 spots higher in the draft too. Yeah. So.
But back just to finish answering that question, because they did mention about Joey Gatto in the second round. For people that are watching that don't know, Joey Gatto is a pitcher from New Jersey, a righty who's committed to North Carolina. And Joey Gatto has not looked good this spring. I think the velocity's been down, and I think that his stock has fallen enough that he's probably going to no one's going to be able to buy him out of that commitment to North Carolina. I don't think that he's going to be paid quite enough to do that, not after the way he's looked this spring. The more interesting option in the second round, as far as I'm concerned, would be another New Jersey arm named Heath Philmeyer, who's a Mercer County Community College. He's a converted shortstop. The arm is fresh, really athletic, up to 96, 97. Some feel for his secondary stuff. That's a guy who I think Keith Law has seen him as well. I think Keith wrote him up. Yeah, that's someone who I'd take a flyer on in the second round if I was looking to save money, sign him to a lower slot and throw some of that money into some college-heavy commits, some high school kids later in the draft, some toolsy kids, which I think a lot of our viewership probably cringes at when we're talking about the Phillies drafting toolsy kids. But yeah, not big on Joe Gatto. Other Northeast arms in that second round, if you're looking for a local kid, Heath Philmeyer, Mercer County Community College is my guy.
Well, what I'll say about the toolsy kids is that if this is I'm not wild about Aaron Nola necessarily, but this is one of the reasons that I would rather have Hoffman. Is not just he's got a little bit of higher upside, even with the Tommy John surgery, is that he frees you up to, like you said, buy somebody out of a college commit, and who you're going to get out of that is that kind of toolsy high school guy. So if you're being aggressive and being smart with your draft money, I don't mind the Phillies drafting Anthony Hewitt and missing. I mind them drafting him in the first round and missing. Or I don't mind Larry Green. That's a better one because they jumped about 50 spots in the draft to make him their first pick. So I don't know. I don't know who that high school kid would be, but that's definitely an option if you go with Nola, or not Nola, if you go with Hoffman and get him to sign for less.
The underslot idea for Hoffman is a good one, but I really only think you'd be able to get him to sign underslot. I guess at 7, the slot money allotted for the 7th pick in the draft is $3.3 million. Lucas Giolito signed for $3 million flat as the 18th pick in the draft when the Nationals took him. So even if you get Hoffman to agree for less than he's worth, which would be as far as I'm concerned, any of the top 3 slots, which are like $5.5 million and up.
Yeah,
it's not as far under slot as you think it would be. It's still $300,000, assuming you get him to sign for $3 million, like Giolito did. It's still under slot, but it's only by $300,000.
I don't think the Giolito comp's a good one for that because Giolito is coming out of high school. He was set to go 1-1. He comes from a fairly well-off family. And his fallback plan was to just rehab and go pitch it at UCLA, who a year before had put 2 power right-handed pitchers in the top 3 picks of the draft. So if Hoffman goes back to school, he'll be lucky if he gets 2 starts in, even in a best-case scenario. So he still will not have pitched. There's no incentive for him to go back to school. There was Giolito at least had a legitimate fallback option.
Yeah, Hoffman would probably have to go pitch on the Cape or something after the draft.
That would be after the draft. He'd have
like Anthony Renato did and try to work some leverage that way. When I saw Hoffman against the University of Virginia, physically I comped him to Jamal Crawford because he's like that 6'4", very lanky, a little bit disproportionate as far as arm length goes, which is fine because it's just better extension that he gets on his way to the plate.
Did you say Jamal Crawford, like the basketball player?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I think a lot of people have. I mean, when I say a lot of people, the maybe 2 or 3 dozen people that read the report I wrote up on Hoffman, which you can find at prospectinsider.com, were tickled by that. But
that's not only the cross-racial, cross-positional, but cross-sport comparison.
That's just what he looks like physically to me. He just looks like he's a coat hanger under his jersey. Like there's still projection there, which I like too. Most of the kids when you read the reports on these pitchers in the draft, they're never going to throw as hard as they do the spring before the draft because they're pitching a few months out of the year. They're pitching once a week instead of once every 5 days. So just that natural wear and tear on the arm, the velocity on a lot of these kids is going to dip. And the only way to counteract that is if they still have physical projection left. And Hoffman is, a rare college arm who still has some of that. He was 92 to 95 most of the start. That I saw him touch 98, if I remember correctly, and flashed plus breaking ball plus changeup. And I put a number 2 starter ceiling on him. If you twisted my arm and forced me to comp him to somebody, I guess stuff-wise it would kind of be Max Scherzer. I think that's
comp.
I think that's pretty close. Scherzer back when the fastball had a little bit more heat to it than it does now. But obviously, like, the delivery is totally Max Scherzer's delivery is unlike anything
Mm-hmm.
that I think we have going on. Just stuff wise, I think that's kind of close. I like Hoffman a lot. I'd be enthralled to see the Phils pop him at 7. I would.
I don't even remember what question we were supposed to be.
We didn't come up with another one after the Nola Gatto question.
Okay. So let me pick another one. Here's one from Matt Winkleman. If you're the Cubs, I like this question because it's something that I've personally given a lot of thought to. If you're the Cubs, who do you take, and how does it affect the rest of your draft? I think this is so. I'm just to preview. I don't know about
yes.
About 18 hours into the future. I've got 5 things you need to know about the MLB Draft going up on Grantland tomorrow. And one of the things you need to know is who the Cubs pick at 4 will be what determines sort of the middle of the first round. Because I don't, those 5 guys that I brought up before, Rodon, Aiken, Kolek, Gordon, and Jackson. I don't think the Cubs are, at least in the mock drafts I've read, the Cubs haven't been linked to any of them very often. So if they go sort of a little bit off the menu at 4, who they take will have a domino effect. So, like, if they take Nola, that could have an impact on. That would obviously have an impact on what the Phillies do. They could take. I think Keith Law had them linked to Michael Conforto.
Yeah.
There's a non-zero chance. I talked to Jim Callis last week, and he said my man Max Pentecost could go as high as 4 to the Cubs. So, who do you take if you're Theo?
I'd probably take. I mean, obviously, it depends on who goes number 3, which I think we can assume at this point. The indications are that the White Sox are going to take Tyler Kolek at 3, which is I'd be very happy about if I were the Cubs at number 4, because I think for me, I think I'm a little lower on Kolek than the industry seems to be, just because he is round. And that's just one of those personal bias things.
You talk about not having much projection left. I mean, in as much as you need projection when you're already throwing 101.
Right. That's just a personal bias thing for me. It's just I have concerns about kids that are 17, 18 years old that are already built like that. So I think that Kolek's, if Kolek goes 3 and then the board you're looking at is that next cluster is Gordon, Nola, Hoffman, Pentecost. If they were going to do Conforto, that would be a serious underslot thing, and that's just not something that if I were running things I would really consider.
Yeah. I like Conforto, but I don't like him at 4.
I'd probably go Nick Gordon, and you could probably talk me into Nola. But I like Nick Gordon. I think up the middle talent in this draft, and just in general, is at a premium. I think Nick Gordon has it. I like the strength and sort of the bat control he's shown for someone who does have his build, which is not quite as frail as his brother's was at the same age, but is still pretty thin. What I've seen out of Nick is more, it has me optimistic about his ability to hit. And I think he's a no-doubt shortstop, and that gets you 2/3 of the way to a big league career as far as I'm concerned. And, just having that, I think, is just having a viable shortstop in your system, I think, is a valuable commodity. I think I'd go Nick Gordon at 4.
Yeah, I think so too. The other reason I don't like Kolek is a little less baseball related. Is the Cubs are getting beat up for producing all these great position players, and they have no pitching. And if they pick Kolek, not only is he a little higher risk than Aiken or Rodon, I think he's going to take a little longer to get up to the big league. So you're going to have Almora and Baez and and Chris Bryant coming up within probably the next 12 months, those guys are going to be coming out and those idiots on talk radio and in internet comment sections, they probably don't bother Jed Hoyer too much. But I would just be annoyed at the questions that I'd have to answer about when is Colett coming up. Given the options on the board, I'd probably take Gordon too. Maybe Nola. He could be. I think the Cubs are developing a team that will be good enough that they can plug Nola in, and Nola will be useful in his pre-arb years in a way that he won't for the Phillies, just because the Phillies don't have they don't have shit in their farm system right now, and they don't have a competitive team anywhere, in the next 3 or 4 years. So getting a guy who's good now for the Phillies, I don't know, that makes sense. I think he fits the Cubs timeline a little better. I would give serious thought to taking Pentecost at 4. And you said that being a no-doubt shortstop gets you 2/3 of the way there. That's true at catcher. I've watched I actually saw him for the first time last weekend at the regionals, and just his athleticism behind the plate is incredible. He's not a huge guy, but he moves well. He's really fast for a catcher. Greg Swindell said he reminded him of Craig Biggio. I've heard the Jason Kendall comp tossed around. We mock Jason Kendall, but he was hitting 300 with 20 stolen bases for Kendall, 5 or 6 years.
Go look at Jason Kendall's stats from '99 through 01. That's 3 years of an elite bat behind the plate. He's not elite, as far in the grand scheme of things, hitting wise, because there wasn't a ton of power there. But just to have a guy who can play, who can catch, and who can do that offensively is absolutely valuable. And I've heard the Kendall comp too. And I think if you are going to do an underslot deal at 4, if you held a gun to my head and said pick someone who we're going to go underslot with, I think it would be Pentecost. For the same reason you said, I think he's no doubt. He's a catcher back there. And I wasn't as sold on the bat at the beginning of the season as I guess I am now because of the way he has performed. And honestly, most of the work I've done on Pentecost has been from early season looks and stuff from last year, because that's what's been available just video-wise. And obviously I'm not going to go all the way down to Kennesaw State to see one dude. But I like Pentecost a lot. I wouldn't blink about, popping him in the top 10. I like him quite a bit because of the premium defensive profile, and I think that goes a long way for me. Because I've seen Troy Hanzawa get to AAA. I've seen, Brian Bocock get to AAA and have a cup of coffee in the majors. If you can play a premium defensive position, you're going to wear a major league uniform, chances are. There's a reason Tuppy Gosowich, has put one on. So, I'm with you there on Pentecost, and I like him a lot. I do. But he's not. The Phillies aren't on. They're not. Yeah,
that's breaking a lot of hearts. I didn't even bother hoping for that.
I did.
I'm not going to set myself up for that kind of disappointment.
Oh, see, I do that all the time. I drove across the country and I walked into this house for the first time, and we were disappointed a little bit. But the reason I thought maybe they would be on Pentecost is because they liked Reese McGuire so much last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought maybe the linchpin there was, here's a guy that's going to catch for sure. And this year we have the same thing, and maybe that would influence the thinking. But at least from what I've heard, they're not really thinking about it. Unless, who knows what's going to happen with the guys they do like in front of them, with Newcomb and Nola.
Yeah.
But I still think at that point that someone would fall that they prefer.
I think I'd rather have I'd rather have Nola than Pentecost. I think I'd rather have Pentecost than Newcomb. For the Phillies at 7. I don't think that I don't think the Cubs should even be talking about that sort of second tier player at 4. I think
No.
I think even Conforto would be disappointing.
I do too. I haven't. He's the guy in that top echelon who I've seen the least on, admittedly. And I mean, I could text someone right now who I know has seen him a bunch, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
But let's get another question because I want to. We've maybe talked about 6 guys. I don't know how long we've been doing this, but we've maybe talked about.
We've been up here for a while. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, well, the Phillies were 43 minutes, but.
Okay.
But yeah, the Phillies have been I mean, the Phillies are drafting at 7, so we don't need to know everybody. Up, Eric, your video freeze? You still hear me? Okay. Well, we're gonna figure out what's going on. It might be from my end. All right. So I will take another question while I try to figure out what's going on with Eric and his video. So we're talking about, you said we were talking about like 5 or 6 guys. Some people a little bit further down that I've seen, liked what I've seen. There's the Indiana catcher Kyle Schwarber, who I like a lot. He's back. Back?
Safari quit unexpectedly.
Okay.
That's what I was told
good.
on my wife's computer.
I realized how ill-equipped I am to carry this live and on my own. So
I don't know what I would do if you died on me. I don't know.
Well, I think if I die, the video goes down. So
okay.
Let's hope that doesn't happen. Or,
well, it's good that you're not using some unknown neighbor's internet connection then.
That's true. Yeah, you said you could do it, and then if my cable modem comes in, okay.
It was supposed to be here by now. I should say that the internet, the modem that I'm leeching Wi-Fi off of, is named The Dude Abides. So I don't think that guy has a problem with it.
No, probably not. So yeah, where do you want to go?
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we got a couple. Here's another one from Matt Winkleman. Who's the best college guy nobody's talking about?
Ooh, that's a good question. Wow. I gotta think about that one. It's weird that question. I have to address the question itself. There's nothing wrong with that question. But who's the whatever that no one's talking about question is really hard to answer when I brought up a community college kid from New Jersey already on this hangout. Like, I'm so immersed in it at such an unhealthy level that it's hard to know who no one's talking about because I'm talking about everyone I can. But who's... See, I wish I would have... I wish you would have asked me this question last year because I had a guy off the top of my head that I was like, I like that kid a lot.
Well, who was that guy?
Zach Herman's from Princeton, who the Cubs ended up taking. Who's a college kid that no one's talking about that I'm really interested in? I'm trying to rack my brain about people that I've seen this year. I don't know. Pick a different question. Let me think about that one.
Well,
I want to answer that question.
I've got a couple. One guy that and not that nobody's talking about, but let's say is you're not going to see in the top 100. I've got a couple pet guys that I've been paying attention to.
Mhm.
I went to see Indiana for Kyle Schwarber, but they've got Sam Travis, who's he's a college first baseman, so how much upside is there really? But you've seen college first basemen get drafted, and the ones who really know how to hit will come up and contribute. And Sam Travis really knows how to hit. And he's not some of the better college first basemen like AJ Reed, for instance. He looks like I don't know. I would say he moves like something, but he doesn't really move. He's sort of he's that body type that you don't like. But Sam Travis is a little smaller. He runs well. I like the swing. The other guy who I've sort of been following is Karsten Whitson out of Florida, who's the 9th overall pick in 2010, and is sort of my poster child for why, if you're a high school pitcher who's drafted in the first 5 rounds, you should never, ever, ever go to college, because his stock was slipping last year when he was a junior. He was real good as a freshman. He was okay as a sophomore, and then hurt his shoulder as a junior, missed his entire junior year, was inconsistent this year, and then all of a sudden was back in the SEC title game. I think he's a guy who could go sign for way under slot at the back end of the first 10 rounds. And, if you miss on that pick, who cares? But, if he comes back, which is a big ask from shoulder surgery, there's still a lot of upside in that arm.
He picked a good time to start throwing harder.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a stacked Florida team, but he still could not get on the field.
Sitting here trying to answer Matt's question, I came up with an answer for like the polar opposite question, which is who is a college guy who people are talking about who I don't think anyone really should be, and that's Nick Howard from Virginia, who is suddenly being mocked in the back end of the first round.
Yeah, Cal said he could go high as high as the teens.
He's a pure arm strength guy for me. Now, granted, I saw him early in the season, and I don't know what's developed since then, but when I saw him, he was, like 92 to 95. It was early in the season, and he had thrown harder than that the year before, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was sitting like 94 to 97 now, after the season has sort of gotten going and it wasn't freezing cold in the Northeast anymore. But even still, his bread and butter secondary pitch is the curveball, supposedly, and for me, it was just a really easy idea out of the hand. Just the arm speed was very different, and just based on pure arm strength, talking to guys at that game when we were watching Howard, I was like, yeah, I would draft this guy somewhere, and if the breaking ball comes along, or if you have him come around a little bit more on the side and you turn it into a slider and it sticks, then great, then you've got a reliever. But I just don't understand the first round love there. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, there are a couple Virginia guys, Derek Fisher's there too, that I'm not wild about. Who you're seeing in the, maybe not locks for the first round, but you start seeing them in the 20s and through the sandwich round in the second round. I think that team's better than the sum of its parts. But yeah, one guy that AJ Reed is the college guy that we're hearing too much about. He's if he doesn't win the Golden Spikes this year, I'd be shocked, because he was the best power hitter in the SEC and Kentucky's Friday night starter. So, just a two-way contributor like that is huge at the college level, but he's not going to do that in the pros. And, he's another guy who gets by just on being so strong. I could see him striking out a ton once. You'll see a good breaking ball in the SEC from time to time, but, it's different once you get up to AA, AAA. I could see him being a guy who destroys the lower levels and just cannot figure it out once he gets to AA. And the other thing is, the added value of the the added value of the pitching. Like he's not gonna play both ways in the pros.
Yeah, he's not. No, he won't.
Yeah.
When's the last time someone actually tried to do that at a high level?
Brooks Kieschnick.
Yeah, I thought so. I wasn't sure if anybody had done it since then. Doesn't work out so well.
Yeah, he's the last guy who like tried to do it even remotely long term in the major leagues. I think Savory was playing both ways up till like Double-A, but he wasn't even the first pitcher to pinch hit for the Phillies when he was up there.
All right, I have a name for Winkleman now.
All right, let's hear it.
I did not see him this year. His name is Michael Fagan. Okay, he's a left-handed pitcher at Princeton. I saw him pitch last year before he was draft eligible. And there was heat on him then that left very disappointed because 3 seasons ago he looked very good. Last year, not so good. His dad, I think he's from California, Fagan is, and then went to Princeton. His dad would fly out for every game that Michael pitched from California, so I think the family had sort of the money to kind of meddle with baseball things, and they hired like some sort of pitching coach for him, and the pitching coach lowered his arm slot, and then I guess Fagan was pitching with a lot less velocity last year than he was the year before, and I don't know what changes he's made, but that velocity is apparently back, and he's turned some heads. I didn't get out to see Princeton this year, regrettably, but because I have family out there and I like it out there. But that's a name that goes way back now with people being interested in him. And then he sort of disappeared last year and has kind of resurfaced this year. It would be an interesting late round selection is Michael Fagan, the lefty from Princeton. So that's my college sleeper.
All right, let's get to another question. I had one. I had a good one picked out. Oh, here's the one. I don't know if every time there's a draft discussion, this one comes up. Which 2014 makes the big leagues first, or which 2014 draftee makes big leagues
Birdie.
First? You think it's Birdie?
Yeah.
Did you see him against Kentucky the other day?
No.
He was low 90s through 7 straight balls to start his appearance. Yeah,
Great.
It was. I was shocked that Louisville held on.
He looked great at Temple. Birdie did.
Against the team that no longer plays baseball. I think Birdie could be up quickly. I also think that he could never pitch in the majors. If he's at 91 with no control, that's different.
Oh, yeah, that's not. Yeah, that's different than he's touched triple digits in the past this year.
Yeah, Nick Birdie, for those of you who don't know, is Louisville's closer. And if you're a college closer and you're going in the first or second round, you better throw 100 miles an hour, and that's what Birdie does. So,
or did up until recently.
Yeah, he might be better. He might have just had an off night. But
wouldn't it be funny if Pat Connaughton just exploded? If just someone just stuck him in the bullpen, and the right pitching coach found a way to make it work, and he just blew up. You know what I'm talking about? Pat Connaughton from Notre Dame.
Do not know who you're. Wait, the name sounds familiar, but
Has he played basketball?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Pat Connaughton from Notre Dame is this just big, arm strength guy. I guess, he's going to get a lot of the Andrew Brackman comps because of the basketball background, I think. But, he's just another arm strength guy.
I don't know the last time one of those basketball converts panned out.
I can't think of one off the top of my head either.
Hendrickson? Do we count that as Mark Hendrickson? Do we count that as panning out? That was also
I would, yeah, absolutely. I would count that.
Yeah, my top draftee to reach the major leagues is Jacob Lindgren, the lefty out of Mississippi State. He's a low arm slot guy, throws in the low 90s. He's got just a killer slider, just an unhittable slider to same-handed batters. I think that he could be a decent loogie in the major leagues right now. I think he's, Jim Callis dropped the sort of not as a comp necessarily, but as they're going to treat, or he's going to wind up being this guy for this draft class is Paco Rodriguez.
Okay.
Who was a third rounder out of Florida a couple years ago, who is my least favorite college baseball player of all time. But the Dodgers drafted him in the third round, and he reached the majors the same season. So he beat. Why am I blanking on all these people from that draft class? Or it was Alex Wood, Mike Roth, Michael Wacha, a bunch of college pitchers from
who still got to the majors very quickly, all of them.
Yeah, that draft, Kevin Gausman, that draft put I think like half a dozen college pitchers in the majors within 12 months, but Paco was the first. Lindgren is a little bit more of a stuff guy, a little less of a deception guy. But I don't think he's ever going to be more than a middle reliever, but I think he could be a good middle reliever, next week if he gets drafted and signs.
Well, let's make this question more fun then. Who's the first bat to get to the major? I say it's Schwarber. But you and I like Schwarber more than most people like Schwarber.
Yeah, I used to, as recently as about a month ago.
Kyle Schwarber, the catcher and first
catcher
from Indiana.
From Indiana, who I profiled a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I love him. I think he's got power. I think he's got plate discipline like you wouldn't believe. I think he's got good makeup. The thing about him is I don't think he's going to be the first bat up to the major leagues because as recently as about a month ago, I was optimistic about his ability to stick at catcher. And if I were to draft him, I think he's mostly going in the mid-teens. I'd at least want to give him the shot. I would be extreme if I were a major league GM or player dev guy. I'd be extremely liberal about letting guys try to stick. But I've seen him just miss on fastballs with nobody on base. Just miss trying to catch him. He's certainly not the other top college catcher who's one of those. Is he going to be a catcher? Is he going to be a first baseman guy? Is another guy I know pretty well, Grayson Griner out of South Carolina, and the question about him sticking behind the plate is entirely about his height. Well, it's about his height and the fact that he once had the yips throwing the ball back to the mound.
Yeah.
So he has to break down his return to the pitcher, and those two things don't really impact his defensive ability. He threw out something like 70% of base runners. He's got a killer arm. I think it's possible he could hit enough to play in an outfield corner. But I think with Griner, it's more about looks. I think with Schwarber, it's a lot about how he looks because he's, when I interviewed him, he's about my height, but he's about, he's big in the shoulders.
He's listed at 6 foot even, 240 pounds.
Yeah.
I'm 5'11", 155.
Yeah, he's twice as thick as you. I think he is twice as big around at the shoulders as you are.
He has 100 pounds on me.
Yeah, he's just a huge, and he's not fat. He's got kind of a pudgy face, and he used to have that tufted goatee, which made him look like Joe Blanton.
He looks like Joe Blanton.
Yeah, I think the fact that he looks like Joe Blanton in the face makes people think he's bigger than he is, but that's a lot of weight to move. He's not that elite receiver that I think he'd need to be to stick behind the plate.
I also wrote up Schwarber for ProspectInsider.com and Sam Travis as well, and Josh Akame, who's a first baseman at Newman Goretti High School near Philly, who's the heir apparent to both those guys at first base or left field. He's an IU commit, and I like him a lot too. But the thing that, and I didn't write this in my piece on Schwarber because I hadn't done video work on his defense yet, which is what I like to do for catchers at least. I think if I'm doing defensive evaluation of a catcher, I'm doing video work from the center field camera where it's just easier for me to see a lot of the things they're doing receiving-wise. And I think his receiving's okay. Certainly passable, although there are those issues with him getting his hands across the zone. If like he sets up inside and the pitcher misses way outside, to get his hand all the way out there in time to get to those balls. And I didn't really see him work on the ground a whole lot in the video work I've done. But the main hang-up I have for Kyle Schwarber behind the plate is the arm, which isn't bad like from a pure arm strength perspective, but his mechanics are very odd. It's even kind of difficult for me to articulate what they look like because he almost sort of like windmills, and the way he comes out of his crouch, his whole body kind of has like, I guess, spinal tilt to it. And he popped. I think it was 2 flat or 198 for me, which is just fine. But I can't imagine him with the way I've seen him throw when I have seen him throw from behind the plate, him having any modicum of consistent accuracy with the way he comes up out of the crouch and fires to second base. That's the thing that bugs me the most right now. Because you can do different things to work on, even if he has the athleticism to work on his knees and block balls, the way that Tommy Joseph, who Kyle Schwarber also looks a lot like Tommy Joseph in the face. He does. Like Tommy Joseph just doesn't have the athleticism to move his body in front of balls in the dirt that get on him quick. He has trouble with pass balls and wild pitches. And the arm strength is great, and so you just kind of have to weigh those two things, and the receiving's okay. And, do all the pieces, add up to something that is a passable catcher, even if there are some things that you don't like. And I think that you're right. Whoever pops Schwarber is going to give him every chance to succeed back there, because the value with the sort of bat that you and I both think he's going to have, which for me is plus raw power with probably average to above average contact that plays up because of how good that approach is. And you're right, it is really good. That's a stud. If you can leave him behind the plate, and if he has to play first base, then that's like an average to above average everyday player, and that's a great thing too. But it's not, the ass kicking, like 6 or 7 win player behind the plate that's just mashing.
No, I think if he sticks behind the plate, he's going to make all-star teams. Just the sheer offensive numbers that he's going to be capable of putting up, and just because he's a big guy, a power hitter, I think his contact skills get a little underrated. He had, I forget the exact numbers, but it was something like 41 walks to 34 strikeouts this year. It's the Big Ten.
Yeah,
so
it's Big Ten.
What he does with Major League breaking stuff, but yeah, I love the bat, but I would probably slow him down 12 months just to be absolutely certain that he can't stick behind the plate. And I'm trying to think of, this is a really weak class for college position players too.
Oh yeah, it's bad.
So the other guys that I could see going in like the top 15 or so, Trey Turner, Pentecost, those 2 guys still have a lot of questions about their hitting. And I think the only college position player who doesn't have much development left to go with the bat or with the glove is Michael Conforto, and that's just because we know he's a corner outfielder already. So, I guess he's probably my number one, or my first college position player to reach the majors.
And just as a caveat for everybody, Michael and I like Kyle Schwarber probably more than anybody else. We are higher on him than the industry seems to be, and even like. I was when Keith Law went to see Schwarber and Sam Travis at Penn State. He and I were at the same game, and we came away from the same trip to see the same 2 guys basically with different opinions about Sam Travis, who I don't really like very much because I didn't like the way he interacted with breaking balls against Penn State. And no offense to the Penn State kids, you're playing D1 baseball, and that's much more than I could ever do. But they're not, SEC curveballs, and Sam Travis was struggling to pick those up. And Keith thinks that Sam Travis, as a pure bat-to-ball prospect, is superior to Schwarber. And I think he wrote that. But so there are different strokes for different folks, and Michael and I just really like Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah. Here's a question from Moscow Rules. Who will be the first player from the state of Georgia drafted? I think that's pretty much a slam dunk for Pentecost, right?
I believe so.
Sorry, I caught you in the middle of eating something.
It's okay. Unless I can't see Michael Chavis going before Pentecost does.
Yeah, there's like half a dozen interesting prep players from Georgia, but I don't think any of those guys are going to go before like 25. I think they're all 25 to competitive balance round, early second round people.
I don't know if anybody else. That was my wife.
Well, she didn't see me wave. I got to turn the camera back on.
I didn't. Hello.
She didn't. She should be on camera instead of me. You should just look at her while I talk. But where were we? I'm looking at my wife now. Okay.
Eric just got married, by the way, so he's not tired of looking at his wife yet.
I got married 10 days ago, 11 days ago, and then we 2 days after we got married, we got in the car in Catasauqua, Pennsylvania, said goodbye to our families, and have been driving across the country, and we just arrived at our final destination a couple hours ago. So, I don't know who was here at the top.
It's real important.
If anybody knows, if anybody's that involved in following my whatever I publicize on the internet, that they know any of that stuff. But yeah, I'm tired. I don't see anybody else from Georgia. I'm just looking at my list here.
Geddes is gonna go.
Yeah, Geddes is the only other one.
Geddes is gonna get a GM fired.
He would get me fired because that's the kind of guy who, at the back end of the first round, when everyone that you really kind of like is sort of gone, and you're like, who are we going to take? And you're picking between Geddes and, like, I don't know, the Taekwon Forbes and maybe Eric Fetty or those guys. Geddes is the guy that I'd be like, I'll take a chance on that guy, and yeah, he's interesting. For those of you guys who don't know, Michael Geddes is a one of those toolsy high school outfits.
Great athlete. We're not sure if he can actually play baseball yet.
Right. He's one of those who's got like the 80 arm and can really run, and the kind of guy that I fall in love with, on paper, that I consciously have to remind myself to, Mike Poppy has a much better chance of doing anything, and it's a constant struggle one day at a time. My sponsor's been helping me with my toolsy high school position player issues. I've had the same sponsor for a couple of years now, so.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, like once every 10 years, one of those guys will put it together.
Yeah.
And far more often, like if this draft was like 3 or 4 ago, and Ruben Amaro had his first pick, I would bet almost any amount of money that Geddes would be the guy he'd take. But
I honestly don't know when it comes time to draft how much input Ruben has compared to how much input,
I stepped in it.
How much input Marty has.
Yeah.
But I know it leans Marty very quickly.
Is Safari freezing again?
I'm okay. Are you okay?
Yeah, you just got stuttery for a second.
Okay.
Yeah. We do sort of allied the line between the general manager and the front office at large. So not Ruben Amaro necessarily himself, maybe, but the Phillies front office under Ruben Amaro.
There was a guy in the front office that I talked to before last year's draft who really liked a guy, and to the point where I almost was like thinking about saying something publicly about how much that team liked that guy, and then they passed on him because that guy didn't have any decision-making power. So no matter how much he liked him, no matter how high he thought he was going to go, he didn't go there. There's the Phillies are, we kind of know at this point, are a little bit on Sean Newcomb. At the beginning of the season, when things were still really cold up here, there's one guy that sees players for the Phillies that thought Newcomb was a back half of the first round guy. And now they might take him 7 if things fall in a certain way. So,
yeah, there's a one comment on the YouTube page so far, and it's can you not draft Sean Newcomb so the Mets get him? So.
Let's talk about Newcomb.
All right, let's talk about Newcomb. I know bugger all about Newcomb because he didn't play in the SEC.
Right. Okay.
So I'm going to listen to you talk about Newcomb.
I have a full report up on Newcomb on ProspectInsider.com if you want to go read the whole thing. I'm sure it's much more thorough than I'm going to be verbally. And I also got to tape his bullpen before the game, right behind the catcher. And I think that video might still be on the Prospect Insider site, even though YouTube told me to take it down because I think "Give Me Shelter" was playing in the background, and they did not. They didn't like it. So it might be down because YouTube, even though I told them a cover band was playing it in the stadium, they didn't buy that. So, okay, Sean Newcomb, big-bodied, left-handed pitcher from the University of Hartford. Physical comps that scouts have thrown on him, including a couple of the guys I was just sitting with at that game at Rutgers. They think physically he looks like Roger Clemens, like a left-handed Roger Clemens. He's very thick in the thighs and in the ass. He generates plus velocity with a fastball with tremendous ease. He was up to 96 when I saw him. I think he's touched 96 in every start. He only did it once for me, so it really kind of plays 91 to 94, but there are a lot of 93s and 94s. It's a 3/4 arm slot. Like I said, he does it very easily. And he's got a 4-pitch mix: fastball, slider, curveball, changeup. The slider is my least favorite. I actually kind of think that depending on whichever organization picks him, because there are obviously organizations that don't like to teach their amateur pitchers cutters unless they absolutely have to. But I'd like to see him kind of convert that slider into a cutter. I think the changeup is going to be his best secondary pitch at maturity. I think it's fringe average right now with a chance to be plus. I think the curveball is below average, fringe average with a chance to grow to true average. And I think that fastball changeup combination, especially with how hard that fastball is and how quickly it gets on you because of the ease with which he sort of generates that plus velocity, I think that he's going to be very good. I think I put a number 3 ceiling on him, and if the Phillies ended up with him at 7, I think that would be okay. I think that's fine. When I saw him earlier in the season, when things were really cold and wet, I was more maybe this guy's like, the 15 to 24 range or something like that. And that's without having a full context of the other guys in the draft. I think I've seen maybe 8 guys that might go in the first round this year or something like that, which is a great year for me in the Northeast. That's terrific. But still doesn't give me the sort of full scope of things. But I think Newcomb fits in that top 10, and maybe not super comfortably, but I think he's there. And I know the Mets like him as well. And I don't know who left that comment. Do you know who left that comment?
It was a YouTube commenter named Kevin Brown, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Probably not that Kevin Brown.
But yeah, I know that a couple of the Mets, at least one of the Mets prospect writers, has seen Newcomb a couple times, and he's very interested in him as well. And I know Sandy Alderson's been to see him. So, but as I said, Jack Srencik, the Mariners general manager, has also been to see Newcomb, and I think I think that's his ceiling for Newcomb is at 6.
All right. So one question stream has kind of slowed down a little bit. So if you're watching this, you want to know something, you haven't asked anything yet.
Can you tweet the link at me so I can tweet it out, because I still haven't tweeted anything about this yet.
Oh, really?
I don't have as many followers as you do, but it can't hurt.
Well, I'm going to do that right now. This is how the magic happens. One question that we got sort of a variation of that I've been kind of kicking around is what to think of the Phillies player development system, because they haven't brought up anybody from within, even with drafting low. If they drafted all in the first round, even with all the trades they've made, they've gotten, is the last, if Don Brown is what he's been this year, is the last player they brought up who was worth a crap Carlos Ruiz. That's kind of a frightening thing to think about in 2014. And you're a little less of a snotty internet outsider than I am. So do you think there's something wrong with the Phillies player dev situation, or do you not even know what to diagnose at this point?
I think a big reason that we haven't seen talent generated from within is because of all the trades that were made from the Blanton, Adrian Cardenas deal. Actually, before that, the Lidge, Bourne deal on through, I guess, the Pence deal. That's we need to have some sort of phrase coined for that sort of talent exodus that occurred during that time. And I know a lot of that talent hasn't panned out, and that's not to say that some of it maybe would or wouldn't have if they would have remained in the Phillies organization, maybe a guy like Michael Taylor works out or something like that. We don't know that for sure. But had all those trades not been made, you'd be looking at Jonathan Singleton and Travis d'Arnaud and Jared Cozart and Josh Zeid and Domingo Santana would be on the way. And maybe, Michael Taylor turns into even just a bench outfielder, or, Adrian Cardenas was on a bench for a little while and stuff like that. So part of the reason things have seemed so barren recently is absolutely because of those trades. And then part of it is also because they've missed, on a couple guys like Anthony Hewitt and Larry Green. Those guys are both non-prospects for me, and if you ask me to pick one of them, I'd pick Hewitt instead of Green, to be honest with you. But so there's a combination of things. It's with anything, it's hard. It's not hard. It's just not smart or possible to say this is the one thing that's wrong with this entire organism, and that's what needs to be fixed. It's a combination of stuff, and I do think that the one thing that has befuddled them that really bothers me is the way the arms, all these young arms that we thought some of them were going to, when they threw them to the Major League wall, were going to stick as bullpen pieces, hasn't happened at all yet. Diekman, I guess, is Jake Diekman's the most successful example of him, DeFreitas, Mont, Rosenberg, there's just a slew of these guys, and Mario Hollins came out of nowhere this spring. This is how relievers are made. They're just arm strength guys that you kind of see if they stick. And I know before the year, I don't know if I wrote it, I know some of us have written it, that we were looking forward to watching some of these young bullpen arms sort of bake and become something delicious, and none of them have. And there are reasons for that we could talk about each one of them in depth if we really wanted to. I don't.
Yeah, I don't want to do that either.
But I don't get it. And I think we're getting to a point between that and the crazy rash of injuries that the minor league arms suffered last year between Macias, Watson, Morgan. Kenny Giles was hurt last year. Pettibone's been hurt a bunch now, since the start of this year. Like, it's a trend thing now more than a random rash. So I don't know what's going on with the minor league arms, but that's the one thing that bugs me to a point where I wanna blame somebody, but I can't figure out who that might be.
Yeah, I think that's well said. There's a bunch of things that have gone wrong. The trading away all the prospects, giving up a lot of those first-round picks for signing free agents. I was going to say, I don't know that I necessarily liked any of those free agent signings at the time, but on the whole, that was to build a team to win as many World Series as you could from 2008 to 2011, and I think that's a bargain we were all okay with making at the time. I think that's a bargain looking back on it that I'm okay with making now.
Except the Pence deal, which I don't think anybody liked when that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the frustration now is people who kind of underestimated how difficult it would be to rebuild this team, particularly in an era, major league general managers and front offices and scouts have never been better than they are now. There is no easy way back once you've constructed a team like this, and we just need to be okay with the Phillies. I mean, the Phillies are going to lose 85 games a year at the absolute minimum for the next 3 years at least. And, I'm okay with that as a price for all we got to see, over the 5 years that came before. I think it's shock. It's looking for someone to blame for this era ending when really you could see it coming a mile away. And, we're not used to this. We're not used to the Phillies being bad anymore. Like, they were bad forever. I was 6 years old in '93, and I didn't see another Phillies team that was any good. I don't know, maybe 2001. Certainly not after that. You could say the next legitimately good Phillies team I saw was when I was in college, and we just sort of need to readjust our expectations. There is no easy way back from this, and I think part of it is giving up is that strategy, selling out the future to win now, that we were all okay with at the time. I think part of it is bad luck. Adam Morgan blows out his shoulder. Shane Watson blows out his shoulder. Some things you just can't avoid. But, I think part of it is also that they have not drafted well, and that team to start was built on the Phillies drafting as well as anybody in baseball. They drafted and developed, from 98 to 2002 or so. They were one of the best drafting and developing teams in baseball. That entire core was homegrown and drafted in the top 5 rounds within a 3-year span. So when you're good at it, you win the World Series. When you're not, you don't. And I don't know what the way back is.
Not every team can be the Cardinals, and the Cardinals won't be the Cardinals forever. The way they've churned out these arms, and Oscar Taveras kind of came out of nowhere. When I first saw Oscar, it was fall league. There wasn't any huge buzz about him. And, you saw him take 3 at-bats, and you're like, holy shit, where the hell did this guy come from? And, and now you have one of the top 5 prospects in baseball. It's not, a sustainable thing. It's kind of cyclical. Just like a rash of injuries is kind of randomness, so too is this kind of success. So it's hard for me to hold any team to the standard that, to a standard that is, elite, especially when elite is only elite for a short amount of time. In 5 years, we might not be talking about the Cardinals player development system the same way we talk about them today. We may not be talking about the Red Sox player development system the way we talk about them today. And I think the same goes for the bottom feeders. And it seems like the way the Phillies farm system kind of looks right now is that that's where they are. They're in that bottom 7 or 10 teams as far as the system goes. And sometimes it just happens, and there are reasons for it that are the fault of the organization, to be sure. And then some of it is just noise the noise of happenstance. But it isn't good right now. It has a chance to get better with a lot of the talented kids down in the low minors, and in even still that haven't even stepped on a professional baseball field yet. Your Cord Sandbergs of the world, your Jose Pujols and Luis Encarnacion's of the world. Those are very interesting young players who you don't see in a box score right now because they're not in one, because they're down in Clearwater still. And you might see them at Williamsport, and some of them you won't. And a bunch of the other kids are putting up terrible numbers because they're, Carlos Tochi still looks like a middle school kid, and Debbie Grullon can't even vote yet, and he's in A-ball with Mark Leiter, who's 23, and other guys like that. So, it's a complicated evaluation process when you're looking at a farm system. And while the Phillies are admittedly don't have an exemplary one right now, I think again, as human beings, it's just one of our tendencies to just try to find something that's causing something else. When sometimes we can't pinpoint that one thing. I think, anthropologically, isn't that why people kind of started believing in gods, because they needed a way to, why is it raining? Well, there must be something causing it. Why is it raining?
There was something in
the farm system suck. There must be something causing it. Not really. There is a little bit, but not as much as you think.
This is the source of most of the bullshit in sports writing. I think is part of that that human desire to find meaning in things, and just we don't accept that sports are not entirely random, but largely random. But
who thought the Rockies were going to be good this year? Who said that? How was that?
Back to the original point, I think the most important thing now is, just to be patient and to hope the front office does the same. We'll come back in. We'll see how this draft goes tomorrow, and we'll come back in 12 months and see if there was J.P. Crawford in it. And there's nothing really, there's nothing the Phillies can do. When I do the crash bag normally and just talking about the Phillies online, not all the questions. I got a lot of requests for Max Pentecost fan fiction, but everything that's not that is some variation on how long until the Phillies are good again, and how can they speed up the process. And the answer is I don't know, and I don't know. It's going to be a while. In the meantime, maybe follow the Sixers a little bit closer if you can't stand to watch the Phillies lose, because they're going to do it for a while. And I don't know, it's hard to throw up your hands and say this too will pass, but I don't have a better answer for you right now.
I don't either. It's something that they've made mistakes. It's clear. We know the issues that the team has. We've beat it to death. With some of the stuff that goes on. And no front office is perfect, and there are going to be mistakes. But I don't have a timetable for you.
This front office is good, but there's still you could throw the 2010 Cardinals front office in charge of this team, and they wouldn't be able to turn it around quickly.
No, they're in a rough spot. And they are in many ways victims of their own success. And this is, Game 6, watching Chris Carpenter carve through the lineup without using a changeup, basically, it was sort of the the start of things ended.
Yeah. Talk about randomness and just not having, Roy Halladay lets the first batter he faces score, and that's it. One last one. We've kind of slowed to a trickle in terms of questions. So let's wrap up on this one from Corinne. Corinne Landry, our Crashburn Alley confrere. Who do the Phillies take with their number 1 pick in 2015?
Wow.
I've got 2 names, and 3 players, one of whose name I can't remember right now, but.
Well, then you start, because I have to think about that. My brain doesn't process things as fast as it should right now because of the circumstances in which I'm currently interacting with you. And also, we've been doing this too long, and I can feel my wife getting pissed.
Okay.
So
we'll wrap up on this.
She says she's not pissed, which means she's probably really pissed.
Okay. Well, I'll say LSU shortstop Alex Bregman has been one of the top hitters in his class. He's probably not going to be a shortstop in the pros, but my dream scenario is, the Phillies pick about where they are right now, back half of the top 10. Bregman drops to them. They move him to second base. He comes up in 18 months and just sort of slides in for Chase Utley when he retires. The other guy is, you're not going to believe this, is that Mike Cameron, the former Reds and White Sox and Mariners center fielder.
Yeah.
He has a son who is old enough to be in the draft next year, and he's apparently really good. So Daz Cameron, Spaz for Daz is the catchphrase for next season. And who's the Duke pitcher? It's Mike's son.
Mike Matuella, who was the first name that I was going to bring up. Mike Matuella at Duke, who I guess to a degree was a bit of a pop-up guy this year, if only because he is projected by a lot of people to be the potential number 1 overall pick in next year's draft. And he's just, your typical right-handed, fireballing college pitcher, fastball slider primarily right now, and big, lanky guy with projection, and it just looks like, an awkward teenager, crazy extension. And he's certainly a guy whose name you want to know for next year's draft. The other guy, a second baseman. You said you don't think Bregman can play shortstop in the pros, and I tend to agree with you, and that's only because I'm really stingy about my shortstops and their defense. Like, I personally don't think Xander Bogaerts is going to be a shortstop for very long. He's not my type of shortstop.
He's not skinny. It's you hate anyone who's not skinny.
That's not true. But like Ian Happ, who's a second baseman at Cincinnati, who there's no Temple baseball next year. All the Philly people can't go see him at Temple next year.
Yeah, but that's not too far for me. Here, everybody come crash at my place.
Cincinnati. He's an interesting college hitter who I got to see this year. And then I guess the other interesting arm that I saw this year at Temple was Jake LeMoyne from Houston, who's you're going to hear a lot about Aaron Garza, but Jake LeMoyne is the real sort of elite prospect in that University of Houston Cougar rotation. And then Daz Cameron is the first guy that came to mind as far as high school kids for next year's draft. Those are, I guess, my 3. It's hard to know. How bad do we think that the Phillies are going to be next year? Do we think it's going to be? I mean the rest of this year. What kind of draft pick are they? If the season ended today, and next year's the 2015 draft order was set, they're looking at a top 5 pick right now, are they not?
I have not looked at the standings. I'll be honest with you. I haven't written about MLB in at least a week, so I haven't looked at the standings in a while. God, if they pick in the top 5, that is going to be a little depressing.
I think that if the way things are right now, I think it would be a top 5 pick.
Sorting, loading.
The only other guy I'll say,
they have the 5th worst record in baseball, so they're in line for number 5.
The only other guy I'll say is a young man named, is it Jake or John? I think it's John Aiello. It's either Jake or John Aiello, who plays at Germantown Academy in Pennsylvania, and he's a Wake Forest commit. And I don't think he gets there unless something catastrophic happens. So that's someone. If you live in the Philadelphia area, go see. I forget it. It escapes me now. If it's Jake or John. Is it John? Okay.
Wait, hang on. Do you know? You don't know what the first name is. You don't know how to spell the last name.
It's A-I.
Okay, I got it.
L-L-O.
Yeah, John Aiello from Lansdale, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Go check that out. Go support your local high school and college teams. If only to not even, it's mostly free in the Northeast to go see college baseball. So go do it because it gives you a really tremendous appreciation for what you're watching in the majors and just in the pros in general. Because amateur baseball in the Northeast is bad. So go see it.
It's not that bad. There's a kid from my hometown, Devin Smeltzer, who's in my he played Little League with my little brother, who's supposed to go in like the first 10 rounds. He was thinking about USC and committed to Florida Gulf Coast instead. So, I guess I'm not as invested in whether or not he turns pro, but yeah, you shouldn't have gone to see him because he goes to Bishop Eustace, and Bishop Eustace sucks. So there
are really a lot of interesting kids from PA in the draft this year, or from New Jersey. When a couple years ago, the highest draft pick I saw was Joe DiCarlo, who was a sandwich round pick of the Mariners, and was just a severe overdraft for a high school shortstop who was going to have to move to third in the pros, and was built like a Division I linebacker, had no physical projection left, and when he took BP for a bunch of scouts and I after one of his high school games with a wooden bat, which is the first time I'd seen that, so that was pretty cool. He didn't put any balls out, and when you're a no doubt third baseman in the pros with no physical projection left, and you can't put any balls out of your high school field with a wooden bat, that doesn't bode well for your chances to hit for enough power to profile at third base at the major league level. And yet somehow the Mariners thought he would warranted a sandwich round pick. That was the best amateur player I saw that year. And he's not a prospect. But things are really good this year. Between Liam Sabino, who's a Vanderbilt commit that's from East Stroudsburg, and I think goes to a prep school in New Jersey. I think he's going to go to school, but he's just a slew of kids this year from the Northeast. And that it's possible I just got better at finding them, but it was an up year for the Northeast.
All right, I think that's a good place.
I should point out before you sign off that my wife just motioned to me and held up our brand new kitchen knife and said, "This knife cuts really well." So we should probably end things.
Okay, I thought we were lucky because my cat didn't attack me again. So I was gonna say we should do this again but maybe we should wait till your wife's out of town.
No, it's fine. She's very supportive of my my interests and my strange obsessions. Like she bought me tickets to go see Alton Brown live for my birthday and stuff. So she's very supportive. But I'd love to do post and beyond. I think it makes sense to do. And I'll be glad to take any more questions, as I'm sure you would be too, via the Twitter or email or however, leading up to the draft, because I don't have anything better to do but make my house look like someone actually lives in it.
Yeah. So you're at Longenhagen.
Yes.
I'm at MJ Baumann, which you can see at the bottom of the screen right now. Yeah, and we'll have this up in a post at Crashburn Alley. You can go on the YouTube site or the YouTube link and comment there. You'll be able to see the rebroadcast. And if you enjoyed this, then let us know. If not, if there's no interest, then I've got no problem making this a one-off. But all right, go save your marriage, Eric.
Okay, go do that.
All right, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.
Okay.